So, we have a solar ingress. The sun is moving into Sagittarius as we speak. This is Thursday evening, Thursday, December 15th. On December 16th, the sun moves into Sidereal Sagittarius. Now, this is a very interesting placement because, of course, the sun is it's the energy of the king. The sun is actually what's called the Paramatman, the supreme self, the one self that's non-differentiated. So the undifferentiated self, the non-localized being within is the sun. In yoga, that's called the Paramatman, the supreme self, the one light that illuminates everything, the light without a shadow. That is the Paramatman, the supreme self, the highest sun. When spirit takes form, it's actually through duality, through the interplay of the sun and moon. Forms are created, Shiva and Shakti, and then we experience the sun through its shadow as well, because then the sun in form hits form, creates a shadow, and we have the duality between light and shadow. But the supreme self, the Paramatman, the highest self, has no shadow. There is no shadow with the divine sun, with the supreme self. Interesting, because I was just spending time with my guru Amachi in Michigan, and someone asked her about this phenomena called the dark night of the soul. The dark night of the soul. Well, it's pretty common, and it's really what we talk about when someone goes through that spiritual transformation where they sort of evoke a conscious death experience, where we really embrace our own sort of death. It's really like the death of the ego. This is often called the dark night of the soul. But the way Amma answered was very interesting, of course. The first thing she said is, the soul, there is no darkness in the soul. It's all light. This is the Paramatman, the supreme self, the light without shadow. Once spirit takes form, there's the shadow that's created through form. Because, as I said, light hits an object and creates shadow, and then we live through this duality. And because we don't know who we are, we haven't remembered who we are, we forget, we don't live in touch with the sun as Paramatman, we encounter the sun through its expression in the world of duality, and we encounter our divine sun, our supreme self, through the limited agency of form and mind. We experience all the planetary energies through the mind-body complex, through the ego structure and all of that. So we usually encounter the sun in the forms of power, the limited power that we're capable of wielding. This is why the sun can convey a sort of domineering energy at times. It's literally related to the king. This is the archetype, but literally the true king has all the power and doesn't need to assert and inflict and enforce any kind of heavy-handed tyranny over his subjects. So a good king is generous with the power, just like the sun, and the lower king takes from the kingdom and spins attention back on themselves for their own glory. So the way we usually encounter the sun is through this duality of light and shadow, but this is because we mistake our power to be something that's localized, and then we experience frustration because we're always trying to push the limits of our personal power through form. This is just an explanation of the sun as the Paramatman, as the supreme self. The nature of the sun is to burn off the impurities of the ego that come from our limited forms of power. So what the sun does is it's trying to show us the true power, and what it does is in our limited power plays, or through the suffering of our limited power plays, or the limited power exchanges that we have, we realize our mistakes and go aspiring toward higher forms and more truthful forms of power, hopefully. And this is why when someone becomes addicted to the outer forms of power, they fall from grace really high. And this is the duality between the sun and Saturn. Because the sun is that illusion, at least through form, that this is my power, I'm the king, let's say like the literal king. But then Saturn is on the opposite side saying, yeah, but you have to deal with time in this realm. In this realm, actually, Saturn is more of the king in some ways than the sun. This balance between the sun and Saturn is very important, because Saturn is really, in many ways, the sort of king of form, because Saturn rules time. Once spirit takes form, they have to deal with Saturn, the limitations of form. This is really interesting because what's going to happen when the sun goes into Sagittarius, it's going to be aspected by Jupiter and Saturn. So, first of all, it's going to be aspected, well, it's actually aspected by both of them at the same time, because Saturn aspects 3 houses in front, and Jupiter aspects the trine, which is the 5th and the 9th houses. So Saturn's going to be aspecting 3 houses in front. Saturn is now exalted in Libra, so Saturn is about 4 degrees Libra right now, and Jupiter is about 6 degrees retrograde Aries. So especially for the next, from like December 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, like the first 5 or 6 days, really, we can say safely, we're going to be experiencing the sun getting a mutual aspect of Jupiter and Saturn. So I've heard a couple astrologers make some references to the fact that Jupiter is aspecting Saturn. I mean, that Jupiter is aspecting the sun. We also have Mars and Leo, so there's a lot of planets in the fire signs. But the big thing that I notice more, especially right now that's going to be very urgent, is Saturn is also aspecting the sun. When Saturn aspects the sun, this whole process of being realistic about our true power and having to deal and focus our power within the container of time and form is really important. And so what's going to happen is the sun goes into Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter. It's the external masculine nature of Jupiter, which connects us to our sense of meaning, hope, purpose, principles, religion, beliefs. Things that we believe in is what Sagittarius is about. The sun is that power, the supreme power. But however much power we really think we have, this has a lot to do with the sun. The sun is that consistent power that literally is the vitality in our body and all of those things. So elevating that your limited power structures toward that highest sense of meaning and purpose, which is literally just the sun in Sagittarius, is going to be big for the next 30 days starting in December 16th. So it's a great time to put the king on the throne of highest meaning and purpose. In addition, though, there's going to be the aspect of Jupiter. Jupiter's the ruler, so he's like the indicator, the activating quality of that expansion, hope, optimism, purpose, and meaning. So Jupiter's aspect is going to be big in actually conveying that wisdom to your soul's nature, to your deeper soul nature. The aspect of planets, what's called the drishti, means that they actually pass their influence on to what they're seeing, to what they're looking at. So the sun going into Sagittarius just by itself would put the king or put the soul on the throne of power that's related to our higher principles. But then to have the ruler aspecting it too, to have Jupiter there is really actually like the teacher. Jupiter is actually talking directly to the king as well while he's there. So it's not just that the king is in the minister's house. The minister is there talking to him as well. But in addition, we have Saturn also aspecting. And Saturn makes us practical, realistic, determined, and makes us concentrate our energy in a realistic, practical, and tangible way to make those things happen. Because no matter what, all this hope and optimism is good, and we need it. But what we really need on this plane, as much or more than anything, is the willingness to concentrate, be determined to face the truth in practical ways, to take practical efforts, practical means, and to sacrifice and commit to the truth, whatever it looks like. And this only comes from Saturn, because Saturn is where we need to make peace with the fact that we're going to lose it all at some point through form. Like I said, no matter how mighty the sun might be, Saturn has the last word on this plane, because we're all going to die, you might say. Saturn's going to take away the form at some point. And if we haven't made peace with that, it doesn't matter how much power you think you have. Like they say, Alexander the Great took nothing with him. You take nothing with us through form beyond the abyss. So a great opportunity to not only feel the hope and optimism through the soul's nature, but also to concentrate your attention and energy through practical efforts and means with the Saturn aspect. Big stuff. And stay tuned for more updates as this transit happens in the next month.